O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouths of babes and infants, you have founded a bulwark because of your foes, to silence the enemy and the avenger. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You've given them dominion over the works of your hands. You've put all things under their feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the seas. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. You may know of writer and philosopher Wendell Berry, who was born in the Great Depression and grew up on his parents' farm in Kentucky. He attended the University of Kentucky, was recognized as a gifted writer, and after earning his master's, he became a creative writing fellow at Stanford. After a year in Tuscany as a Guggenheim Fellow, he taught for a couple of years at New York University. But when he was invited to come back and become an instructor at the University of Kentucky, he heard the call to return to the land where he had grown up. There he purchased a farm. For decades, he and his wife have slowly and deliberately renewed the land that had been misused and abused. A committed Christian, Berry writes, "The earth is what we have in common. That is, what we are made of and what we live from. And we therefore cannot damage it without damaging those with whom we share it. But," he says, "I believe it goes further than that. There's an uncanny resemblance between our behavior toward each other and our behavior toward the earth." I would add that there is an uncanny resemblance between our relationship with God and our relationship with God's creation. Psalm 8 is a trumpet-blasting song of praise, heralding God as creator of the cosmos. The psalm, an echo of the creation story we find at the beginning of Genesis, begins and ends with the same celebratory line. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. On the heels of this opening line, the songwriter declares, "You have set your glory above the heavens." Today, I think we might say, "You have strewn your magnificence throughout the universe." And then displaying the feeling that most of us have experienced of being an insignificant speck when looking at the vast sky at night. The psalmist says, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars and all that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? Mortals that you care for them." The ancients recognized that the universe was vast, its size mind-boggling, but they had no idea how truly incomprehensible it is. Today, astronomers inform us that our galaxy, the Milky Way, is 100,000 light years in diameter. And there are 100 billion galaxies. God, what are we that you are mindful of us? How stupefying that you actually care for each one of us. Also astonishing is our home, planet Earth. We are the right distance from the sun to have liquid water. Get a lot closer, it evaporates. Further out in space, it will freeze. We have an atmosphere with just the right amount of oxygen for plants and animals to exist. And what an amazing water cycle. Quick reminder of what we learned in science. The water from the rivers, lakes, streams, and oceans all evaporates and condenses into clouds. Then it comes back to the earth in the form of rain, sleet, and snow, waters the earth, and the cycle starts all over again. Brilliant. Of course, it is the water that enables life to thrive. Rain falls and the soil is nurtured, and the soil stores the water in it. The nutrients in the soil dissolve in the water, and the plants then draw these nutrients into their roots, pulling them into their stems and trunks and branches and leaves. The sun shines on the green plants, exciting these tiny green engines that convert the solar energy into sugars that are transported through the plants to feed them. The process also releases oxygen into the air. Plants thrive and then eventually die, returning the nutrients back into the soil, which feeds the natural recycling process. Truly amazing. God has given us this remarkable planet of blue oceans and green forests and red rocks and silver mountains and brown deserts and white ice-capped poles. All of this so that we can not simply exist, but thrive. Yet I wonder if sometimes we forget that all of this is a gift from God. You may have heard about the scientist who marched out of his lab and looked up at the sky and said, "God, you are no longer necessary. We have now figured out how to make life out of dirt." The scientist starts to march back into the lab and hears a voice. "Oh, really? Tell me about that." The scientist says, "I will." He reaches down, grabs some dirt, and starts to march back into the lab to show everything. And God says, wait. The scientist says, "Oh, are you afraid we're going to show you up?" No, that's not the problem. Get your own dirt." We take so much for granted. Returning to Psalm 8, we see another parallel with the creation story in Genesis. God has given us a crucial role to play. The psalmist says, "You have given human beings dominion over the earth." We're placed in charge of all these resources of the earth. Both Genesis 1 and Psalm 8 use this word dominion. And what does that word mean? For most of human history, people viewed the earth as a vast wilderness, an endless supply of resources. To many, exercising dominion over the creation just was a green light to grab whatever resources you desired. If they chopped down all the trees in one area, not a disaster. We'll just go to these endless forests and get more. However, in the past couple of hundred years, the situation has changed radically. The world's population has grown so immense, and our technology so powerful, that nature has morphed from a storehouse of endless resources to a fragile ecosystem that we possess the potential to destroy. What does it mean living in the 21st century to have dominion over the earth. While synonyms for dominion include rule and dominate, synonyms also include govern and manage. If we focus on the context of Genesis 1, where human beings are viewed as God's representatives, dominion must be understood as the same kind of rule that God would exercise in the natural world. A world that God created good in all of its parts. Taking a cue from the second creation story in Genesis, human beings are commanded to till it and keep it. It's interesting, the Hebrew term literally means serve it. Humans are to serve the earth because our very lives depend on it. We express our love for our spouse or a friend by performing acts of kindness. How do we express our love for God? In the first letter of John, we read that those who do not love a brother or sister they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. In the same spirit, we cannot pollute or abuse God's creation and then claim that we love God. We play with children for the sheer delight of it. Have we forgotten how to take delight in God's creation? The earth is waking up after winter, finally, and it's beginning to put on quite a show out there. The forsythia bushes are blazing. Buds are appearing on the trees. Soon the branches are going to be just covered with green leaves. Daffodils are standing erect and making their presence known. Hosta shoots have begun to rise from the ground. Now is the time to be dazzled by the resurrections that are happening all around us. Now is the time to be awake to the beauty that surrounds us. Now is the time to help and to heal the earth. How mindful are you of your footprint? My relationship to the natural environment has changed dramatically since the days of my youth. Growing up, I saw my backyard as a playing field. It was for baseball or football, and in my mind, it served no other purpose. I was blind to those flower beds my mother had planted, the bushes my dad had carefully pruned. When a ball landed in one of these areas, I just dashed in, grabbed it, ran back onto the field, oblivious to any damage I might have done. I was both blind and arrogant. I took the earth for granted and acted as if it was there for my pleasure alone. I was blind to its beauty, and I had no concept of nurturing it. Thankfully, as my spiritual life began to develop and to deepen, I began to appreciate the beauty, the awesomeness of the earth. And as I came to understand, not simply in my mind, but really to understand in my soul, that everything was God's creation, I realized that a sense of reverence for God's handiwork was taking root in me, but I'm still working on that. Throughout human history, people in all lands have drawn closer to God when they stared and wondered at the night sky, when they hiked up to the tops of mountains and peered out at all the vast space around them, when they were mesmerized by the waves of the ocean, when they contemplated the intricate beauty of the flowers, when they gazed at eagles gliding on the invisible wind currents. Francis of Assisi may be the first person to come to mind, But from time memorial, nature has beckoned people of faith into the wild to pray and to meditate and to draw closer to God. It was in the wilderness that that Moses heard God's voice to free the slaves in Egypt. It was in the wilderness that Hebrew people began to have close encounters with God, and where they had the 10 Commandments. It was in the wilderness that Jesus did his spiritual wrestling and discovered the course for his ministry. The natural world has always been a special place to brush up against God. If God created all things, and God is present in all things, then the earth is sacred. And Chief Seattle was right in saying the earth is precious to God, and to harm the earth is to heap contempt on its creator. We can trample the earth, or we can treasure it. To preserve and protect it, to restore and renew it in a concrete way of loving God. We can heal the earth and be partners with God. As you walk out of this building today, turn your eyes to the beauty around here. And look for the gifts that God is offering you today. In the book of Exodus, we read that God spoke to Moses out of a burning bush and told him he was standing on holy ground. May you and I hear the voice of God when we see the stunning sights of nature. And may we remember that every day we are standing on holy ground.